My name is Rory McKean. I'm the CEO of a company called Franklin Robotics. We're a startup up in Billerica, a little kind of northwest of the city. We are a robotics company focused on agriculture. That's sort of our background is the intersection of robotics and agriculture. My co-founder's a guy by the name of Joe Jones. He and I worked together at a company called Harvest Automation. Previous to that, he was at iRobot, one of the inventors of the Roomba. So we started the company, and where the intersection of ag robots and consumer robots is home gardens. So a little bit about the home gardening space, which is where we've been focusing our time. It's about a $6 billion market, at least in the US, and it's about a third of US households will have a garden of some sort. They'll grow vegetables on their back porch or out in their backyard or something like that, or at a community garden. And people are pretty passionate about the activity. They'll spend about 5 hours a week out in the garden. And it's sort of a relaxing, helpful kind of experience. And so what we did is said, okay, so this is an interesting spot. Let's go talk to a bunch of gardeners and see what we can figure out. And what you find out when you talk to them is they really like the gardening, they really hate the weeding, which is not super surprising. So some of the things that come up is weeding can be really painful, particularly as you get older. It's harder to bend over, it's harder to pick the weeds out by hand. People don't like using chemicals. If you're growing vegetables for your family, you don't want to be putting Roundup or any sort of herbicides down to get rid of the weeds. And people enjoy this activity. If they could spend more time doing it, they would, but they're time constrained. But the short answer is nobody likes to weed. And when you think about it, how do you get rid of weeds in your garden is you put down chemicals, you pull them out by hand, or you let a robot take care of it. And that is super interesting to us because we like to make robots. So we developed a robot called Tertill. And so here it is. So Tertill is a solar-powered robot that lives in a vegetable garden or flower garden. And the way we solve this problem is, so we have a chemical-free approach to removing weeds. What we use is a little weed whacker that's on the bottom of the robot. It's a waterproof robot. So the idea is the robot just lives outside in the garden. You don't need to bring it inside when it rains. You just leave it outside. And it's solar-powered, which means you don't need to charge it. So you just leave it out there. Every day it charges itself up. It'll run around and take care of the weeding. So it's easy to use. And so this is one of the important constraints for us is gardeners are not all tech savvy. So how do you make something that's really easy for my mother to use? So there's no mapping, there's no programming, you don't need to configure it in any way. You just kind of put it down and let it wander around in the garden, and it'll take care of everything from there. We needed to pick the right size, so it needs to be big enough that it can drive over hoses and rocks and other things that you find in the garden and not get stuck. But on the other hand, it needs to be small enough so that it can fit in between plants. And so this ended up being sort of the happy size, which is, this is about 8 inches in diameter. And what's also interesting is that it's a mobile sensing platform. It's a computer that's on 24 hours a day. So it introduces the possibility of collecting data all the time and giving feedback to the gardener about what's going on in their garden. What is the microclimate? How can you see what's actually happening to your plants? So that's about it. We have sort of an interesting approach to sensing the plants. And what's interesting is it is non-optical. So one of the things that when people first think about how do you differentiate between weeds and plants is people want to put a camera on there and do machine vision. And there's a couple reasons that doesn't work in this application. There's sort of the more obvious ones of it is complicated, it costs a lot of money, and this is a consumer product. But there's also a really simple practical reason, which is that sensors get dirty when the robot is out in the garden, which if you've made any robots, you'll find is infuriating. So what we have instead is we use capacitive sensing, which works really well on plants, as it turns out. And we use a height-based approach to decide what's a weed and what's a plant. So tall things are plants, and we leave them alone, and short things are weeds, and we cut them. So the robot's out there every day, and it continues to cut the weeds, keeps them from getting any taller, keeps them from establishing themselves, and your plants continue to grow tall. So I'll run the robot around here just to kind of show you that it works. Probably only 10 people are going to be able to see it all that well. I'm glad to show it to you afterwards. But sort of the last thing I wanted to mention is the way we're launching this product is on Kickstarter. Sorry. And we launched our Kickstarter late last night. So today's our first day, but if you're interested, there's a bunch of detail. You can go there, that takes you to our Kickstarter page. There's a lot more detail, more videos of the robot running around. So look at that at your leisure. I'll start the robot running around here, but glad to take any questions.
What kind of grade can it handle? Like slope?
Yeah, so the question is what kind of slope can it handle? You end up becoming sort of terrain limited. There's various angles of repose of soil in the garden. We cap it at around 20% slope, which is relatively good. But the robot needs to be careful that it doesn't get itself into trouble. So it runs around unsupervised, an hour or two every day. So having it get stuck is frustrating and kind of dumb looking when it needs to call for help. So we do the best that we can to avoid that by sensing when we're driving up the slope or down the slope into some dangerous situation, then we'll back off.
How do you prevent it from wandering off?
How do you prevent it from wandering off? Right. So there are 2 rules for when you put Tertill around in the garden. One of them is that there can't be any tall weeds because we're differentiating based on height. So if any of your weeds are tall, the robot will treat them as a plant and leave them alone. And so either your plants are tall and established, or you put this protective collar around them. These are just little metal collars that we ship with the robot. And you put them around your seedlings to protect them until they get tall enough. The other is that there needs to be a border around the garden. So it can be a stone wall, it can be a fence, it can be sort of anything. But it needs to be a couple inches tall for the robot to sort of bounce off of.
How do you prevent it from wandering off in the sense of somebody walking away with it?
If someone's going to steal it, right. So it's funny, we do a lot of big events. Maker fairs. There's a big one in New York, big one in San Francisco. In San Francisco, nobody asks that question. In New York, it comes up like every other question. So the answer for the first round is you buy a new robot if it wanders off. There are ideas we're thinking of. They add complication and complexity and cost, so they won't be in the first version. But it's something we think about.
What information does it collect? Does it remember, because you cut the length of the wheel, does it remember the location like that?
Yeah, so does it remember the location of weeds that it cuts and things like that? For the initial product, it remembers nothing. And part of that is, so the robot does not have a map of its environment. It operates very similarly to the way the first Roombas did, where it's just sort of bouncing off the walls. It doesn't mean that it's totally random. There's some strategy to maximizing your coverage area that we have baked in. But it doesn't have a map, and part of that is that we don't have any externally facing sensors, which makes that a much harder problem, especially when, there's the weed whacker. When your odometry is so terrible because you're driving around on dirt and slipping. Yeah.
John.
Oh, sorry, there's one behind you. Yep, you.
What price point do you plan on having this be? And say, assuming the Kickstarter is successful, how long do you think it'll be until you're just selling it on your website or wherever you plan to sell it?
Gotcha. So we see our retail price at $300 or so, and we looked at the Roomba and talked to a bunch of people, and we sort of settled on that price point. The Kickstarter price is $250. There are some early bird discounts. Those are mostly gone at this point, but still a couple left. And we plan on shipping next spring. And at that point, probably sometime this fall, we would start accepting pre-sales for people that missed the Kickstarter. But initial shipments in the spring of 2018. Yep.
How tall is too tall, and how does it know?
It's about an inch. Is sort of our threshold. And so the way it works is we have the capacitive sensing that I talked about is embedded in the front of the robot. So that comes down to about an inch off the ground. So if we sense something, we know that there's a plant ahead of us. And so anything that the capacitive sensor doesn't pick up, which would be something sort of non-conductive, we'll just bump into and recognize that we're not making progress and treat that as an obstacle. But you don't want to bump into plants because they're so fragile. So that's why we have the capacitive sensing there. So we can recognize that either it's something that's preventing us from driving any further, or it's a plant, in which case we treat it as an obstacle and turn and we go somewhere else. Sure. Yeah.
Yes, being raised on a farm in Iowa for part of my life, I looked at de-weeding and agony, but a way to stretch the hamstrings. 2 points. It can get very hot in the garden.
Yes.
And 2, if you find, let's say, a marijuana plant or a thistle, it's like a religious rite of passage to dig out the roots so it doesn't grow again. So, with the sensor at the top, how will that deal with the heat? And also, might you look at, if you're sensing plants, what about the dangerous weeds that farmers are trying to get out of the gardens?
Right. So 2 things. So the big thing on top is the solar panel. And part of the reason that it's exposed and not under a dome is thermal reasons like that. We don't want to sort of create our own greenhouse effect and make the temperature even hotter like you do in a car or something like that. So we want to have that on the outside. So it's temperature is something that you need to deal with. And so reducing the amount of sunlight that makes it inside the box is very helpful. So that's one of the things that we do. And we're concerned about temperature. It's part of the problem, but it's a concern. Yeah, I mean the sunlight's great because we need the energy. The other part is so we don't remove the weeds by the roots, and so this is something that's different than the way people do it by hand, right? Because you want to make sure you get the roots out so you can get all the all the stored energy out because the energy is stored in the root structure. So that makes for a really complicated, really expensive, and really unreliable robot, at least at a consumer price point. So the weed whacking works because the robot is out there every day, and this is sort of this virtuous circle of why the robot needs to be out there every day, which is why it needs to be solar powered, which is why it needs to be waterproof. So we keep cutting the weeds every day, so they never get a chance to establish themselves and grow any taller. So that's sort of the way we sidestep that problem. So there is still, when you cut the leaves off, there's still energy stored in the root structure. It'll continue to grow again, but eventually it'll run out of energy.
Can you track where the bad weeds are?
No. So at this point, with this revision, you can't do any sort of tracking. It's on the map.
Quick question,
Sure.
last one.
Okay.
Last one.
Sure. Is that not worthy of a light?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Let's say it does get stuck. Is there
Yeah.
any way it would communicate, say through an app? saying-
Yeah, I guess I didn't mention that. So it is, we do a Bluetooth connection to, and a corresponding app that will notify you that you're stuck. We went back and forth on whether it should be Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and this product is going to be Bluetooth connected. A couple of reasons. Cost and complexity being sort of the 2 big ones. So you can get notifications, that the robot's running, that it's done, and like check what the battery level is, or stuff like that. But also notifications that, hey, I'm stuck, come get help, or come help me. Inevitably, that happens. Reality. Cool.
Thank you.